Trying to explain the appeal of Ridley Scott's Legend to someone who's never seen it themselves is a surprisingly difficult task, as the film is so much a visual and tonal experience that attempting to lay it out as a mere series of plot details and character descriptions can't help but make it sound underwhelming. It's a movie where not a lot actually happens in terms of narrative complexity, and when it does, it's deliberately similar to 1,000 other stories. And while being inside a dream is apt, it's also kind of the broad analogy that winds up meaning different things to different people. Plainly stated, you can't really appreciate Legend, or why the people who dearly love Legend do so, by any means other than to watch it for yourself, which you really should do, as it's easily one of the most visually arresting and unique mood pieces ever committed to film. It's been 3 decades since the movie was released to theaters, and yet somehow it's still hard to name any other film that matches its specific mood and palette. Now, for context's sake, Legend was the movie Sir Ridley was looking to make before Blade Runner but wound up making after. And while calling this a film that does for fantasy what Blade Runner did for science fiction would be pushing it, the two are very much of a kind in that the director was clearly more interested in presenting a lovingly realized elevation of classical genre themes and images. But whereas in Blade Runner, Scott wound up with a narrative that, perhaps not entirely by intent, transcended his aim of experimental formalism, in Legend he did not. The basic idea was to use then cutting-edge filmmaking, editing, cinematography, and effects techniques to bring the look and feel of a classical medieval fairy tale to life in live action, but without adapting any specific story, so that the incidental plot details wouldn't crowd out the sense of sinking into the bedtime story dreamscape and feeling the familiar yet unplaceable characters and events play out around you. And in the usually wordless moments where it hits that target, you could almost mistake Legend for an early Ingmar Bergman or Jean Cocteau film. And if there's one spot where the film doesn't fully stick the landing, it's that it ultimately has exactly enough plot to not feel avant-garde, but also not enough plot to fully add up to a satisfying narrative experience. In summary, Mia Sara is a girl of noble birth named Lily in an unnamed fairy tale kingdom who is beloved by a forest-dwelling loner named Jack, played by baby Tom Cruise. Jack attempts to impress Lily by showing her the secret residence of a mated pair of unicorns whose existence causes the sun to rise and preserves all light and goodness on Earth. Unfortunately, said unicorns and their magic horns are also sought by the goblin minions of the Lord of Darkness, who use Jack and Lily's distraction to wound the pair, steal one of the horns, and spirit the other back to Darkness Domain for a ritual sacrifice that will blanket the world in eternal winter and allow him to conquer the planet. Racked with guilt, Lily pursues the goblins but winds up the prisoner of darkness herself, while Jack is enlisted by an elf, a fairy, and a group of dwarves to take up a sword and storm Darkness Keep to free Lily and the unicorn and set everything right. So, yeah, it's basically a Legend of Zelda game. In fact, the erroneous claim that Shigeru Miyamoto's genre-redefining fantasy game was actually inspired by Ridley Scott's film is an infamous video game industry urban legend that persists to this day. But yeah, the beats are all accounted for. Assemble your party, acquire your weapon, defeat the mini-boss, enter the dungeon, solve the equivalent of a Switch puzzle, defeat the bad guy, restore the magic thingamabob, save the princess. But while Legend's story is so perfunctory that the film would arguably have been improved if it wasn't there at all, in large part it accomplishes its stated goal of moving the action from one lovingly rendered fairy tale tableau to the next, and then quickly getting out of the way so you can take said tableau in. And man, are they worth it. Legend's world was almost entirely created with practical effects, massive sets, and elaborate creature makeup, even going so far as to construct most of the awe-inspiring forest sets in Pinewood Studios' famous James Bond workspace rather than shoot on location in order to allow for total control of lighting and shooting conditions. The result still takes my breath away to this day, specifically the careful line every detail walks between being instantly recognizable as whatever it's supposed to be without making explicit connections to any one outside reference. Anyone who's absorbed even the bare basics of fairy tale ephemera will immediately recognize archetypal enchanted forest, the dungeon, the treasure room, the evil throne, the haunted swamp, the ogre's kitchen, the evil altar, with no exposition necessary as to what these things are supposed to be. In the same way that The Princess Bride recreated the feel of listening to a storyteller breathe new life into a familiar tale, Legend is at its best when it's capturing the sense of revisiting a story you already know by heart, but still love slipping back into. The film looks incredible today, and absolutely mind-blowing when you consider it was made in '85. It's still hard to name another film that even attempts to capture such a specific zone of Brothers Grimm meets Francisco de Goya fairy tale mood outside of maybe The Last Unicorn, and no other live-action film of the era other than The Dark Crystal even attempted to so fully create a functioning fantasy world so wholly removed from our reality. And while the cast is absolutely ultimately overwhelmed by all the production design, save for one specific case we'll deal with in a moment, the performances are mostly good to solid. You probably couldn't have asked for anyone better suited than baby Tom Cruise for playing the apotheosis of every princess-besotted fairy tale hero ever. Mia Sara affects an appropriately naive elegance as Lily. David Bennett and Annabelle Lanyon are off on their own weird movie as Honeythorn, Gump, and Una, and let's face it, Billy Barty and Cork Hubbard could probably do fantasy dwarf roles in their sleep by this point. However, the performer who steals the show without question is the great Tim Curry as the Lord of Darkness. Yes, it's only the second scariest 80s villain Curry ever inhabited, and yes, a big reason Darkness is so iconic, probably more so than even the movie itself at this point, is that absolutely stunning Rob Bottin makeup. But he is bound and determined to not disappear into the prosthetics and ends up giving one of his all-time great over-the-top turns as a result, creating one of the most memorable movie monsters ever. Helpfully, he also gets to be the closest thing Legend has to a fully developed character, and the second act digression where he attempts to seduce Lily to the him side makes for compelling drama as one welcome place where the film's tone and story briefly but deliberately detour from its otherwise rigidly archetypal path into something more outright impressionistic. This sequence plus the makeup and the performance are the reason why Curry's Darkness is pretty much the thing popular culture has taken away from Legend, but I'd still call the whole film absolutely worth seeing if you haven't managed to at this point. As a visual experience and a mood piece, it's genuinely enthralling compelling if you're in the right frame of mind for it, and while it wasn't aiming to be a family film per se, in my experience, younger audiences who have the constitution for some scary monsters here and there tend to be enraptured by it. Decidedly imperfect, yet utterly unforgettable, Ridley Scott's Legend is a real gem.